She never should have taken the Denver to Seattle route on a Tuesday afternoon. But fate doesn't ask for permission. Jessica Marie Davis adjusted her flight attendant uniform for the third time in 5 minutes, her fingers unconsciously finding the delicate butterfly necklace resting against her collarbone. The small silver charm had been her mother's, the only thing she had left from a woman who died when Jessica was just 7 years old. Now, 19 years later, she still touched it whenever she needed courage. Flight 447 was running 20 minutes late, and the passengers were getting restless. Jessica walked down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 737, her practiced smile masking the exhaustion that came from working double shifts to pay for her night classes in child psychology. The vanilla latte she'd grabbed at the Denver airport Starbucks was already cold, but she sipped it anyway, her 5th cup of the day. "Excuse me, miss." A deep voice caught her attention. Jessica turned to see a man in seat 12A, tall, broad-shouldered, with carefully trimmed facial hair that couldn't hide the worry lines around his eyes. Those eyes were a warm, honey-brown color, the kind that made you think of autumn afternoons and campfires. But there was something else there, too, a heaviness that Jessica recognized all too well. "How can I help you, sir?" "My daughter." He gestured to the window seat beside him, where a small girl with straight black hair sat pressed against the glass, clutching a pink butterfly backpack. "She hasn't spoken since we boarded. Actually, she hasn't spoken much at all in the past few months." Jessica's heart clenched. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, the same age Jessica had been when her world fell apart. The child's honey-brown eyes, identical to her father's, stared out at the runway with an expression far too old for her face. "What's her name?" Jessica asked softly, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "Emma Rose Williams," the man replied. "And I'm Mike. Michael Williams." "Hi, Emma Rose," Jessica whispered, her voice gentle as morning rain. "I'm Jessica. I love your backpack. Butterflies are my favorite too." For the first time, Emma's gaze shifted from the window to Jessica's face. The little girl's eyes widened slightly when she noticed the butterfly necklace. "Your butterfly is pretty," Emma whispered, so quietly Jessica almost missed it. Mike's sharp intake of breath told Jessica this was the first time his daughter had spoken to a stranger in months. Jessica felt something stir in her chest, that familiar pull she always felt around children who carried invisible wounds. "Thank you, sweetheart. It was my mommy's." Jessica touched the necklace again. "She gave it to me before she went to live in the stars." Emma's small hand pressed against the airplane window. "My mommy lives there too." The plane lurched suddenly as they hit an air pocket, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Jessica stood quickly, but not before she saw Mike's wedding ring hanging on a chain around his neck, tucked beneath his shirt. Not before she noticed how his strong hands trembled slightly as he helped Emma with her seatbelt. As she made her way back to her station, Jessica's mind raced. There was something about this father and daughter that called to every protective instinct she had, something that reminded her of her own 7-year-old self, lost and scared and desperate for someone to understand. The plane shook again, more violently this time, and through the small galley window Jessica watched storm clouds gathering on the horizon. She had no idea that this turbulence was about to change all their lives forever. Sometimes the storms that shake us the hardest are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. The turbulence hit harder than Jessica had experienced in her 3 years of flying. Emergency lights flickered on as the plane dropped suddenly, causing several passengers to gasp and grip their armrests. Jessica braced herself against the galley wall, her training kicking in even as her heart raced. Through the chaos, she heard it, a small frightened whimper from seat 12. Without hesitation, she made her way down the aisle, ignoring protocol that dictated she remain seated during severe turbulence. Emma Rose was curled into a ball, her pink butterfly backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. Mike had his arm around his daughter, but his own face was pale with worry. "Hey there, little butterfly," Jessica whispered, sliding into the empty aisle seat across from them. "Want to know a secret about flying?" Emma peeked over her backpack, tears making her honey-brown eyes shimmer. "When I was exactly your age, I was on my very first airplane ride. I was so scared because I thought the shaking meant we were going to fall out of the sky." Jessica's voice remained calm and soothing despite the plane's continued rocking. "But you know what the pilot told me?" "What?" Emma whispered. "He said airplanes are like big, strong birds, and birds don't fall, they dance with the wind. Every bump and shake is just the airplane dancing through the clouds, trying to find the smoothest path to take us home. The plane lurched again, but this time Emma didn't hide. Instead, she looked out the window with curious eyes. "Are we dancing now?" she asked. "We're waltzing," Jessica smiled. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Can you feel it? To Mike's amazement, Emma began to sway slightly with the plane's movement, her death grip on the backpack loosening. Jessica started humming a gentle tune, an old lullaby her mother used to sing, and Emma's breathing began to slow. "You're incredible with her," Mike said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been trying for months to get her to respond like that." Jessica met his eyes, seeing pain there that mirrored her own childhood memories. And sometimes it takes someone who's been in the same storm to know how to navigate it. The same storm. I lost my mom when I was 7 too. Jessica's fingers found her butterfly necklace again. Car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning. My dad, she paused, choosing her words carefully. He didn't handle it well. Started drinking. Lost job after job. I learned pretty quickly that sometimes you have to be your own hero. The plane began to steady, and the captain's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've cleared the rough weather. We should have smooth flying from here to Seattle." But Emma didn't return to staring out the window. Instead, she was studying Jessica with the intense focus that only children possess. "Did you draw pictures for your mommy in the clouds?" Emma asked suddenly. Jessica's breath caught. What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I draw butterflies for my mommy. Daddy says she's in heaven, but I think she lives in the clouds because they're closer. I draw her butterflies and hold them up to the airplane windows so she can see them." Mike's hand trembled as he brushed tears from his eyes. "Emma, honey, you don't have to." "It's okay," Jessica said softly. "Actually, Emma, I think that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. And you know what? I bet she sees every single one." Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out a small sketchbook. The pages were filled with butterfly drawings, dozens of them in every color imaginable. Each one was dated in careful, childish handwriting. "This one is from yesterday," Emma said, showing Jessica a purple butterfly with yellow spots. "I was sad because Daddy was on the phone with the mean lawyers again." Jessica's eyes met Mike's over Emma's head. The pain in his expression told her there was so much more to this story. Custody battles, financial struggles, the weight of single parenthood crushing a man who was clearly doing his best. Emma rose. Jessica said, "Would you like to draw one together? For both our mommies?" For the first time since boarding, Emma smiled. As the plane soared through clear skies toward Seattle, Jessica had no idea that this simple moment of connection was about to become the foundation for everything that would change her carefully guarded life. Sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the deepest pain, and the strongest connections bloom in the most unexpected places. The wheels touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport with a gentle thud that seemed to bring Jessica crashing back to reality. For the past hour, she'd been sitting with Emma and Mike, helping the little girl color in her butterfly drawings while Mike shared stories about his late wife, Sarah. Jessica had learned that Sarah died of a sudden heart attack 8 months ago, leaving Mike to navigate parenthood alone while fighting his in-laws for custody of Emma. "They think I can't provide stability," Mike had whispered while Emma was absorbed in her artwork. "They have money, a big house in the suburbs, the whole traditional family setup. I'm just a single dad struggling to keep my solar energy consulting business afloat." Now, as passengers began to collect their belongings, Jessica felt that familiar ache in her chest, the one that came when she had to say goodbye to children who needed more help than a 3-hour flight could provide. "Miss Jessica," Emma tugged on her sleeve. "Will I see you again?" The question hit Jessica harder than she expected. She crouched down to Emma's level, tucking a strand of the girl's silky black hair behind her ear. "I don't know, sweetheart. I fly all over the country, and you live here in Denver with your daddy." "Actually," Mike cleared his throat, looking nervous as he shouldered Emma's butterfly backpack. "We're visiting Seattle for a few days. Meetings with lawyers, that sort of thing." He paused, then added quietly, "Emma's been asking about you since we started talking. She hasn't shown this much interest in anyone since her mom died." Jessica's heart raced. She thought about her tiny studio apartment in Phoenix, her evening classes, her carefully planned schedule that left no room for complications. She thought about her rule: never get too attached, never stay too long, never let anyone need her so much that losing her would cause more pain. But then Emma slipped her small hand into Jessica's, and all those rules seemed as fragile as butterfly wings. I have a 3-day layover, Jessica heard herself saying. I was just going to study at the airport hotel, but would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? Mike asked, his honey brown eyes hopeful. I mean, if you're not too busy. Emma would love to show you more of her drawings, and I'd like to thank you properly for what you did today. Emma bounced on her toes. Yes, and we could go to Pike Place Market. Daddy promised we'd see the fish-throwing people. Jessica laughed despite herself. Fish-throwing people? The famous fishmongers, Mike grinned. And for the first time, Jessica saw what he must have looked like before grief settled into the lines around his eyes. It's Emma's first time in Seattle. I figured we should do the tourist thing. As they walked through the busy terminal, Emma chattering excitedly about everything she wanted to see, Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the dangerous warmth of belonging. Mike carried Emma's backpack while juggling his laptop bag in a small rolling suitcase, and Jessica found herself naturally falling into step beside them, listening to Emma's plans for their Seattle adventure. There's something else, Mike said quietly as they approached the baggage claim. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier. Jessica's stomach tightened. In her experience, conversations that started with those words never ended well. The lawyers I'm meeting with, they're not just handling the custody case. They're also helping me figure out what to do with Sarah's life insurance money. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking uncomfortable. It's not a fortune, but it's enough to make some changes. Maybe hire someone to help with Emma. Like a nanny, Jessica asked, though something in his tone suggested he meant something different. Like a companion, someone who understands what Emma's been through, who could help her process her grief while I figure out how to be the father she deserves. Mike stopped walking and turned to face Jessica fully. Someone like you. The baggage carousel started moving, filling the silence between them with mechanical humming. Jessica stared at Mike, her mind spinning. He was offering her a job, a chance to help Emma in a real, meaningful way. A chance to put her psychology training to actual use instead of just reading textbooks during red-eye flights. I don't know anything about being a professional companion, Jessica said slowly. But you know about being 7 years old and losing your mom, Mike replied. You know about finding ways to cope, about learning to smile again. That's not something you can learn from textbooks. Emma had wandered over to watch the luggage go around the carousel, humming the lullaby Jessica had sung during the turbulence. Her small voice carried the melody perfectly, and Jessica felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. I have a life in Phoenix, Jessica said, but even as she spoke the words, she wondered what that life really consisted of. A studio apartment with a collection of refrigerator magnets from places she'd visited but never really experienced. Night classes where she studied other people's theories about healing traumatized children. A job that kept her moving, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections. Think about it, Mike said gently. We're staying at the Fairmont Olympic for 3 days. If you change your mind about that coffee. Emma ran back to them, her face bright with excitement. Daddy, there's a lady over there with a dog wearing a little jacket. Can we say hi? As Mike allowed Emma to lead him toward the service dog and its owner, he called back to Jessica. Room 847. Emma would love to show you her Seattle butterfly drawing. Jessica watched them disappear into the crowd. This father and daughter who had somehow managed to crack her heart open in the span of a single flight. Standing alone in the busy airport, clutching her crew bag and feeling more uncertain than she had in years, Jessica realized she was at a crossroads she'd never seen coming. Some opportunities don't knock. They land right in your lap during turbulence, wearing butterfly backpacks and honey brown eyes. Jessica stared at her phone for the 15th time in 10 minutes. Mike's number glowing on the screen like a beacon of possibility she was too terrified to answer. She sat in the corner booth of Victrola Coffee on Capitol Hill, her 6th vanilla latte of the day growing cold while she pretended to study her child psychology textbook. The Seattle rain drummed against the windows, creating a rhythm that matched her anxious heartbeat. Every few minutes, she glanced toward the door, half hoping and half dreading that Mike and Emma might walk through it. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Miss Jessica, Daddy and I are getting hot chocolate near the big red market. He keeps checking his phone. Are you coming? Emma, Daddy helped me type this. Jessica's heart melted. She could picture Emma dictating the message while Mike patiently helped her navigate the phone, probably fighting his own disappointment that Jessica hadn't responded to his earlier calls. Before she could second-guess herself, Jessica was gathering her things and heading toward Pike Place Market. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, and the late afternoon light gave Seattle's streets a magical quality that reminded her of movie scenes she'd watched during lonely layovers. She found them at a small cafe overlooking Elliott Bay, Emma's face pressed against the window as she watched the ferries glide across the gray water. Mike sat beside her, looking tired but patient, occasionally pointing out interesting boats while Emma made excited observations about everything she saw. "Jessica!" Emma spotted her first, jumping up from her chair so quickly she nearly knocked over her hot chocolate. "You came. Daddy said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come because butterflies always find their way home." "Hey there, little butterfly," Jessica said, accepting Emma's enthusiastic hug. Over the girl's head, she met Mike's eyes and saw relief flood his expression. "I wasn't sure you'd call back," he admitted as Jessica slid into the booth across from them. "I was starting to think I'd overstepped somehow." "You didn't overstep," Jessica said softly. I'm not used to people needing me for more than making sure their seatbelts are fastened and their tray tables are upright." Emma giggled. "That's silly. Everyone needs somebody, even grown-ups." The wisdom in those words, spoken so matter-of-factly by a 7-year-old, hit Jessica like a physical blow. She thought about her studio apartment in Phoenix, how she could go days without having a real conversation with anyone, how she'd perfected the art of being helpful without being essential, caring without getting attached. "Emma's right," Mike said, signaling the waitress for another coffee. "I've been trying to convince myself I could handle everything alone, but the truth is, I'm drowning. The custody lawyers, the business struggling since I can't travel like I used to, trying to be both mom and dad to a little girl who barely speaks to anyone except apparently flight attendants with butterfly necklaces. I'm not qualified," Jessica said quickly. "I mean, I'm studying child psychology, but I don't have a degree yet. I don't have experience with grief counseling or—" "Experience," Mike interrupted gently. "Jessica, you got my daughter to smile and talk more in 3 hours than any of the professional therapists we've seen in 8 months. You didn't use techniques or strategies, you just understood her." Emma had pulled out her sketchbook again and was drawing while they talked, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Jessica watched her work, remembering her own 7-year-old self sitting in social workers' offices, drawing pictures that no one seemed to understand. "Can I ask you something?" Jessica said to Mike. "Why me? You could hire someone with credentials, someone with references and a clean background check." Mike was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. 2 weeks after Sarah died, I found Emma in her room at 3 in the morning, trying to tape paper wings to her arms. She told me she wanted to fly up to heaven to check on her mommy, make sure she wasn't lonely. Jessica's throat tightened. "I've been terrified ever since that I'm not enough, that I can't give her what she needs to process this loss in a healthy way. But today, watching you with her on that plane, I saw something I haven't seen in months. I saw Emma being a little girl again, not just a miniature adult trying to take care of everyone else's feelings. I take care of everyone's feelings too," Emma said without looking up from her drawing. "It's very tired-making." Jessica and Mike stared at her, surprised by the adult phrase coming from such a small voice. "See," Mike said softly, "she's been trying to manage my grief along with her own. But with you, she just was herself. Scared, curious, silly, sad, all the things a 7-year-old should be allowed to feel without worrying about fixing the grown-ups around her." Emma finished her drawing and slid it across the table to Jessica. It was a butterfly, but not like the others Jessica had seen. This one had 2 sets of wings, one pair colored in purple and yellow, the other in silver with tiny stars. "That's for you and me," Emma explained. "The purple and yellow wings are mine, and the silver star wings are yours. We're flying together to visit our mommies in the clouds." Jessica felt tears blur her vision. In all her psychology textbooks, in all the theories about childhood trauma and attachment, she'd never read anything as beautiful or healing as what this little girl had just created. "The custody hearing is in 6 weeks," Mike said quietly. "Sarah's parents have hired an expensive firm, and they're arguing that Emma needs stability, structure, a 2-parent household. They're not wrong about those things being important, but they don't know Emma," Jessica finished. "Exactly. They see a broken little girl who needs to be fixed. I see a resilient little girl who needs to be understood." Mike reached across the table and gently touched the butterfly drawing. "And somehow you saw that too." Jessica looked out at the Seattle skyline, then back at Emma, who was already starting another drawing. She thought about her carefully planned life, her rules about not getting attached, her determination to help children from a safe distance. Then she thought about paper wings and midnight flights to heaven, about a little girl trying to take care of everyone else's broken hearts while her own was still mending. If I said yes, Jessica said slowly, what would that even look like? Mike's face lit up with hope he was trying hard to contain. And sometimes the scariest decision is the one that feels like coming home. The decision came to Jessica at 2:17 a.m. in her sterile airport hotel room, staring at the ceiling while Emma's words echoed in her mind. Butterflies always find their way home. She'd spent hours walking through Seattle's rainy streets after leaving Mike and Emma at the cafe, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. What if she wasn't enough? What if she made things worse? What if she fell in love with this makeshift family only to lose them in 6 weeks when the custody hearing decided Emma's fate? But lying there in the darkness, Jessica realized the real question wasn't whether she might get hurt. The real question was whether she could live with herself if she walked away from a little girl who needed exactly what Jessica had needed 20 years ago. Someone who understood. At 7 a.m. sharp, she knocked on the door of room 847 at the Fairmont Olympic. Mike opened it looking disheveled, his honey-brown eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. Behind him, she could hear Emma's voice chattering excitedly about something involving room service pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. Jessica? Mike's voice was rough with sleep and surprise. Is everything okay? I want to do it, she said before she could lose her nerve. I want to help Emma. I want to try. Mike's face transformed, relief and gratitude flooding his features. Are you sure? Because once we start this, once Emma gets more attached, Daddy, who's at the door? Emma's voice grew closer, and suddenly she appeared beside Mike, her black hair messy from sleep, wearing pajamas covered in tiny rainbows. When she saw Jessica, her face lit up like Christmas morning. Miss Jessica, did you come for breakfast? We have pancakes that look like mouse ears. Actually, Jessica knelt down to Emma's level. I came to ask if you'd like me to come live in Denver for a while, to be your friend and help you with, well, with everything. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Like, really? Really? Jessica confirmed, her heart pounding. If that's what you want. Emma launched herself into Jessica's arms with such force that they both nearly tumbled backward into the hallway. Yes. We can draw butterflies every day, and you can teach me more airplane songs and we can visit Mommy in the clouds together. Over Emma's head, Jessica met Mike's eyes and saw something there that made her stomach flutter. Not just gratitude, but something deeper. Something that suggested this arrangement might become more complicated than any of them were prepared for. 3 hours later, they were sitting in a downtown Denver law office that smelled like leather and old coffee. Mike's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Novak, was explaining the legal implications of hiring Jessica as Emma's companion. The good news is that having a trained caregiver will strengthen your custody case, Patricia said, shuffling through papers. The challenging news is that Jessica's background check will be thoroughly scrutinized by the opposing counsel. Jessica's stomach dropped. My background check. Standard procedure. They'll look into your employment history, finances, any legal issues, family background. Patricia paused, studying Jessica's suddenly pale face. Is there something we should know about? Jessica glanced at Mike, then at Emma, who was quietly coloring in the corner of the office. My father, after my mother died, he had problems with alcohol. There were some incidents when I was younger. Nothing that was my fault, but what kind of incidents? Patricia asked gently. Child Services investigated a few times. I was removed from his care twice, once for 3 months when I was 9, once for 6 months when I was 12. I lived with my aunt during those periods. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. He never hurt me physically, but there were nights when he didn't come home, times when there wasn't food in the house, occasions when neighbors called the police because they were worried. The silence in the room was deafening. Jessica felt her carefully constructed new future crumbling before it had even begun. Miss Jessica, Emma's small voice cut through the tension. Are you crying? Jessica hadn't realized tears were sliding down her cheeks. I'm okay, sweetheart. But Emma had abandoned her coloring and was standing beside Jessica's chair, her small hand resting on Jessica's arm. Is it because of the sad things that happened when you were little like me? Mike's sharp intake of breath told Jessica that Emma had somehow intuited more than anyone had expected. Yes, Jessica whispered. But you turned out good anyway, Emma said matter-of-factly. You help people on airplanes and you're learning how to help kids who are sad. The sad things didn't make you broken. They made you good at helping. Patricia cleared her throat. Actually, Emma makes an excellent point. Jessica's background could be reframed as a strength rather than a liability. Someone who's overcome childhood trauma might be uniquely qualified to help another child navigate similar emotional challenges. Mike reached over and took Jessica's hand, his touch warm and steady. Your past doesn't disqualify you, Jessica. It's exactly why you're perfect for this. But what if the judge doesn't see it that way? Jessica asked. What if hiring me hurts Emma's chances of staying with her father? Patricia was already making notes on her legal pad. We'll prepare for every possibility. We'll get character references from your airline supervisors, letters from your psychology professors, documentation of your current stability and employment history. We'll present you as someone who not only understands Emma's trauma, but has successfully worked through her own. Emma climbed into Jessica's lap without asking, settling there as naturally as if she'd been doing it for years. Don't worry, Miss Jessica. We're going to take care of each other. That's what families do. The word family hung in the air, weighted with hope and possibility and terror. Jessica looked at Mike, whose honey-brown eyes were soft with an emotion she was afraid to name. So, Patricia said, clicking her pen, shall we make this official? We have a lot of work to do before the custody hearing, and time is our most precious resource. Jessica took a deep breath, feeling Emma's warm weight in her lap and Mike's steady presence beside her. For the first time in her adult life, she was about to bet everything on something other than her own carefully controlled independence. Sometimes the greatest risk is not the leap itself, but discovering you are meant to fly all along. 2 weeks later, Jessica stood in the doorway of what would be her new bedroom in Mike's Denver townhouse. A cardboard box labeled refrigerator magnets balanced on her hip. The room was painted a soft sage green with white trim, and Mike had insisted on buying her a desk by the window where she could continue her psychology studies. Emma had helped by adding butterfly stickers to the mirror and leaving welcome drawings on the pillow. You sure this isn't too weird? Mike asked, appearing behind her with another box marked textbooks, heavy. His hair was mussed from carrying her belongings up the narrow staircase, and there was something endearingly domestic about seeing him in his weekend clothes, faded jeans and a Denver Broncos t-shirt with a small hole near the collar. Weird doesn't begin to cover it, Jessica admitted, setting down the box and surveying her new reality. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a flight attendant with no ties to anyone or anywhere. Now she was living in a house with a man she barely knew, and his daughter who had somehow claimed a permanent spot in her heart. Miss Jessica, Emma's voice echoed up the stairs. Come see what I made for your room. They found Emma in the living room, surrounded by art supplies and wearing a paint-splattered apron that was comically large on her small frame. She'd created a mobile using coat hangers, string, and dozens of paper butterflies in every color imaginable. It's for above your bed, Emma explained proudly. So when you wake up, you'll see butterflies first thing, and you'll remember that you're home now. Jessica's throat tightened. Home. Such a simple word that had never quite fit anywhere in her adult life. It's perfect, sweetheart, Jessica managed, helping Emma hold up the mobile to catch the afternoon light streaming through the windows. The butterflies cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating a sense of movement and life that transformed the space entirely. Mike was watching them with an expression Jessica was learning to recognize, equal parts wonder and worry, as if he couldn't quite believe this was real, but was terrified it might disappear. I called my Aunt Helen this morning, Jessica said quietly while Emma arranged her art supplies. Told her about the job, about moving to Denver. How'd she take it? Jessica grimaced. About as well as you'd expect. She thinks I'm making a huge mistake, getting involved with a complicated situation. She reminded me that I've never stuck with anything longer than a year. Jobs, apartments, relationships. And what did you tell her? That maybe I never found anything worth sticking with before. The weight of that confession hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Mike's eyes softened, and for a moment, Jessica thought he might say something that would change everything between them. But Emma chose that moment to announce, I'm hungry. Can we make grilled cheese? The kind with the crispy edges like Mommy used to make. The mention of Sarah created a brief, awkward silence. Jessica was still learning to navigate the ghost that lived in this house, present in family photos, in Emma's bedtime stories about when Mommy was here, in the way Mike's face would sometimes go distant when triggered by random memories. I don't really know how to make them crispy, Mike admitted, running a hand through his hair. I've been trying for months, but they always turn out soggy or burned. I can teach you, Jessica said. My Aunt Helen made the best grilled cheese in Phoenix. It's all about the butter temperature and the right kind of bread. As they moved into the kitchen, Emma chattering about wanting hers cut into butterfly shapes, Jessica caught sight of a stack of legal papers on the counter. The letterhead read, Hartwell, Morrison and Associates, the firm representing Sarah's parents. More depositions? She asked quietly. Mike nodded grimly. Thought they want to interview you next week. Patricia says they're going to try to paint you as an unstable influence, someone who jumps from job to job, city to city with no real roots or commitment to anything. They're not wrong, Jessica said, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. I have jumped around a lot, but you're here now, Emma piped up from her perch on a kitchen stool. And you brought all your magnets, so you're definitely staying. Jessica smiled despite her nerves. Emma's simple logic had a way of cutting through adult complications. You're right, little butterfly. I brought all my magnets. As they cooked together, Jessica showing Mike the proper butter-to-heat ratio while Emma narrated their every move like a cooking show host, Jessica felt something she'd never experienced before. Not just contentment, but belonging. The easy rhythm of domestic life. The way Emma automatically set the table for three, the comfortable silence when they all focused on their tasks. Jessica, Mike said as they sat down to eat, Emma already biting into her butterfly-shaped sandwich with obvious delight. I need to ask you something and I want you to be honest. Jessica's stomach clenched. Okay. Are you doing this for Emma, or are you running from something in Phoenix? The question was fair, and Jessica had been asking herself the same thing for 2 weeks. Both. She said finally. I am running from something, from a life that felt empty and purposeless. But I'm also running toward something. Toward Emma. Toward the chance to use my psychology training in a way that actually matters. Toward... She stopped, not ready to admit that she was also running toward him. Toward the possibility of being part of something bigger than her own carefully controlled existence. Toward what? Mike asked softly. Toward the kind of life I used to dream about when I was Emma's age. Lying in bed listening to my dad stumble around downstairs. A life where people actually need each other in healthy ways. Emma had finished her sandwich and was now drawing on a napkin, humming the airplane lullaby Jessica had taught her. Are you guys talking about feelings? She asked without looking up. Because feelings are important, but they're also very complicated for grown-ups. Mike and Jessica laughed, breaking the tension that had been building between them. You're very wise, Miss Emma Rose, Jessica said. I know, Emma replied matter-of-factly. Mommy used to say I was born with an old soul. Daddy, can Jessica help me with my bath tonight? I want to show her the butterfly soap you bought me. Mike's expression grew uncertain. If Jessica doesn't mind, I'd love to, Jessica said, though the domesticity of the request made her heart race. Bath time, bedtime stories, goodnight kisses, all the intimate rituals of family life that she'd never experienced from either side. Later that evening, as Jessica helped Emma into her butterfly pajamas and listened to her chatter about her day, she realized she was crossing a line she'd never crossed before. She was letting herself be needed, truly needed, by someone small and vulnerable and trusting. Miss Jessica, Emma said, as Jessica tucked her into bed. Are you scared about the court people wanting to talk to you? Jessica considered lying, giving the reassuring adult answer. Instead, she said, Yes, sweetheart. I'm scared they might decide I'm not good enough to stay here with you and your daddy. Emma nodded seriously. I'm scared too. But you know what my mommy used to tell me when I was scared? What? She said that butterflies are only butterflies because they were brave enough to change. And change is always scary, but it's also how we get our wings. As Jessica turned off the light and headed downstairs, she found Mike waiting at the bottom of the stairs, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said quietly, for all of this. For staying, for caring about her, for... He didn't finish the sentence, but Jessica could see everything he wasn't saying in his honey-brown eyes. Standing there in the hallway of this house that was becoming home, Jessica realized that the scariest part wasn't the custody battle or the legal depositions or even the possibility of failure. The scariest part was how much she was beginning to want this life to work. Le connaisseur. Home isn't a place you find. It's a feeling you build, one butterfly-shaped sandwich at a time. The deposition was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray Tuesday morning, but Jessica had been awake since 4, sitting at her new desk reviewing every detail of her life that opposing counsel might use against her. She'd dressed carefully in a navy blue suit Mike had helped her pick out, her butterfly necklace tucked discreetly beneath her blouse. Emma had insisted on braiding a tiny ribbon into Jessica's hair, for good luck, and the small gesture felt like carrying a piece of their newfound family into battle. "You don't have to prove you're perfect," Patricia Novak reminded her, as they walked into the imposing glass building downtown. "And you just have to prove you're stable, caring, and beneficial to Emma's well-being." But the moment Jessica saw the opposing legal team, she knew this wasn't going to be about Emma's well-being. The lead attorney, Harrison Caldwell, had the predatory smile of someone who destroyed people for a living. Beside him sat an older couple Jessica recognized from photos, Sarah's parents, the Hendersons. Mrs. Henderson clutched a tissue and wouldn't meet Jessica's eyes, while Mr. Henderson stared at her with barely concealed hostility. "Miss Davis," Caldwell began once the court reporter was ready, "you've been employed as Mr. Williams' companion for his daughter for exactly 3 weeks. Is that correct?" "Yes. And prior to that, you were a flight attendant with Skyline Airways, correct?" "Yes. How many different cities have you lived in over the past 5 years?" Jessica's stomach clenched. 7. 7 cities in 5 years. "Would you describe yourself as someone who struggles with commitment?" Patricia interjected. Objection, argumentative. But Caldwell was just getting started. For the next 2 hours, he systematically dissected Jessica's life, her father's drinking, the child services investigations, her pattern of job changes, her lack of romantic relationships lasting longer than 6 months. "Miss Davis, isn't it true that you've never maintained a stable, long-term relationship with anyone, romantic or otherwise, for more than a year?" Jessica felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I've maintained professional relationships. I'm talking about personal relationships. Friends, family, romantic partners, people who depend on you emotionally." Caldwell's voice was like ice. "Isn't it true that you have a pattern of leaving when things become complicated or demanding? That's not. When your Aunt Helen expressed concerns about your decision to move to Denver, didn't you tell her, and I quote, 'Maybe I never found anything worth sticking with before,' suggesting that your commitment to the Williams family is based on emotion rather than professional dedication?" Jessica's hands trembled in her lap. How did he have that conversation? Had someone been monitoring her calls? "Miss Davis, I need you to answer the question." "Yes, I said that. And isn't it reasonable to assume that when this arrangement becomes difficult, as caring for a traumatized child inevitably does, you'll simply move on to the next city, the next job, the next emotional situation that temporarily captures your interest?" The words hit Jessica like physical blows, because underneath all the legal maneuvering, underneath Caldwell's calculated cruelty, was a truth she'd been trying not to face. She didn't know if she could stick with this when it got really hard. "I'm committed to Emma," she said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. "Are you? Or are you committed to the idea of Emma? The fantasy of being the savior who rescues a grieving child?" Caldwell leaned forward. "Isn't it true, Miss Davis, that you see Emma as a chance to heal your own childhood trauma, rather than focusing on what she actually needs?" Patricia was objecting, but Jessica barely heard her, because Caldwell had found her deepest fear and dragged it into the fluorescent light of this sterile conference room. What if she was using Emma to fix something broken in herself? What if her desire to help was really just elaborate self-therapy? The deposition ended with Caldwell's promise to subpoena Jessica's therapy records from college and her employment files from every airline job she'd held. As they gathered their papers, Mr. Henderson finally spoke. "You seem like a nice young woman," he said quietly, his voice heavy with grief. "But Emma isn't a lost puppy you can rescue to make yourself feel better. She's our granddaughter, and she deserves stability, not another person who's going to disappear when things get tough." Jessica fled to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall, fighting tears and nausea. When she finally emerged, Patricia was waiting by the sinks. "They're good," Patricia said bluntly. "They found every weak spot and hammered it. But Jessica, that doesn't mean they're right." "What if they are?" Jessica whispered. "What if I am just using Emma to fix myself? Are you planning to leave when things get difficult?" I don't know. I hope not. But I've never been tested like this before." Patricia studied her reflection in the mirror. The question isn't whether you failed in the past. The question is what you're willing to do differently now. The drive home was silent, both women lost in their own thoughts. But as they pulled into Mike's driveway, Jessica could see Emma's face pressed against the living room window, watching for their return. The little girl burst through the front door before Jessica could even get out of the car. How did it go? Did you tell them how good you are at making grilled cheese? Did you show them your butterfly necklace? Emma's questions tumbled over each other in her excitement. Jessica knelt down and gathered Emma into her arms, breathing in the little girl's scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. It was challenging, sweetheart. But you're home now, Emma said matter-of-factly. That's what matters. Mike appeared in the doorway, his face etched with worry. One look at Jessica's expression told him everything he needed to know. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Jessica and Mike sat on the back porch, watching storm clouds gather over the Denver skyline. The air felt electric with approaching rain, mirroring the tension that had settled over their household. Patricia called, Mike said quietly. She told me what happened today. Jessica stared at her hands. They're not wrong, you know. About my track record, about my pattern of leaving. I have never stuck with anything difficult for very long. But you're here now. For now. But what happens when the custody hearing gets ugly? When the media attention starts? When Emma has nightmares or behavioral problems, or when you and I inevitably clash over how to handle something? Jessica's voice cracked. What happens when this stops being a beautiful story about healing and becomes just hard work? Mike was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I guess we find out who we really are. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Inside the house, they could hear Emma calling out in her sleep, not distressed, just the normal sounds of a child dreaming. Mike, Jessica said, her voice barely audible over the approaching storm. What if I'm not strong enough for this? What if I let her down the way every other adult in my life let me down? He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady against her cold ones. Then we figure it out together. That's what families do. They stay and figure it out together. The first drops of rain began to fall, but neither of them moved to go inside, because sometimes you have to sit in the storm to know if you're brave enough to weather it. The deepest battles aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought in the quiet moments when you decide who you're going to be when everything falls apart. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, shattering the fragile peace that had settled over their household in the week since the deposition. Jessica jolted awake to the sound of her phone buzzing against the nightstand, Mike's panicked voice cutting through her sleep-fogged confusion. Jessica, I need you. Emma's missing. She was down the hallway in seconds, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floors. Mike stood in Emma's doorway, his hair wild, wearing only pajama pants and a look of pure terror. And I heard her get up around midnight to use the bathroom. But when I checked on her just now, he gestured helplessly at Emma's empty bed, covers thrown back, her butterfly stuffed animal abandoned on the pillow. Did you check everywhere? The closets, under beds, the basement, everywhere. Jessica, the front door is unlocked. She's never done anything like this before, not even right after Sarah died. Jessica's mind raced through possibilities while her heart hammered against her ribs. What happened yesterday? Was she upset about something? Mike ran his hands through his hair. The Hendersons called. They wanted to arrange a visit before the custody hearing next week. Emma overheard me telling them no, that any contact needed to go through the lawyers. What exactly did she hear? Her grandmother crying on the phone, saying they just wanted to see their granddaughter one more time before. Mike's voice broke. Before they lose her forever. Jessica closed her eyes, understanding immediately. Emma's 7-year-old mind had processed this as adults fighting over her, making each other cry because of her existence. The guilt would have been overwhelming. I'm calling the police, Mike said, reaching for his phone. Wait. Jessica caught his arm. Let me think like Emma for a minute. She's not running away. She's trying to fix something. Where would she go to make the adults stop fighting? They stared at each other as the same terrible realization dawned. The airport, Jessica whispered. They threw on clothes and drove through empty Denver streets in Mike's truck, neither speaking about the implications of what they might find. Emma had heard countless stories about Jessica's job, about airplanes that carried people to the clouds where her mother lived. In her young mind, the solution was probably devastatingly simple. Fly to heaven, ask her mother to fix the grown-up problems, come back when everyone was happy again. Denver International Airport at 3 a.m. was eerily quiet, with only scattered travelers and maintenance crews moving through the cavernous terminals. Jessica flashed her airline ID to get them through security, her hands shaking as she explained the situation to sympathetic TSA agents who promised to alert airport police. They found her in Terminal B, curled up in a chair near Gate 23, the same gate Jessica's Phoenix flights usually departed from. Emma was still in her butterfly pajamas, clutching a crumpled piece of paper and crying silent tears that broke Jessica's heart into 1,000 pieces. Emma rose, Jessica said softly, sinking into the chair beside her. The little girl looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I was trying to go see Mommy, but I don't have money for a ticket, and the airplane people said I can't fly by myself. Mike knelt in front of his daughter, his voice thick with emotion. Baby, you can't just leave like that. You scared Daddy so much. But everyone is sad because of me, Emma whispered. Grandma Henderson was crying, and you were angry, and Miss Jessica looked scared after the lawyer people talked to her. I thought if I could ask Mommy what to do. Jessica felt tears blur her vision as she read the crumpled paper in Emma's hands. It was a letter, written in careful 7-year-old script. Dear Mommy, the grown-ups are fighting about me again. Daddy's scared they will take me away from him and Miss Jessica. Miss Jessica is scared she's not good enough to take care of me. I think if you could tell the judge people that Miss Jessica is supposed to be my new mom, then everyone would stop being sad. Please help. Love, your butterfly, Emma. P.S. I miss you so much it makes my tummy hurt. Mike read the letter over Jessica's shoulder, and she felt his sharp intake of breath when Emma referred to her as new mom. Oh, sweetheart, Jessica whispered, gathering Emma into her arms. You are not the reason the grown-ups are fighting. You are the reason we're all trying so hard to do the right thing. But what if the judge people say I have to live with Grandma and Grandpa Henderson? They're nice, but they don't know that I need butterfly pancakes on Sundays or that I can only sleep if someone sings the airplane song. Jessica looked at Mike, seeing her own terror reflected in his honey-brown eyes. What if they did lose the custody hearing? What if Emma was taken away to live with people who loved her but didn't truly know her? Emma, Mike said carefully, would you want to live with Miss Jessica and me? Like, as a real family? Emma nodded so vigorously her dark hair bounced. Yes, she already knows how to braid my hair, and she makes the grilled cheese crispy like Mommy did. And when I have bad dreams, she knows exactly what to say, because she had the same bad dreams when she was little. As they drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, Emma finally asleep in the back seat, Mike and Jessica sat in loaded silence. The unspoken question hung between them. What exactly were they fighting for? Was this about helping Emma through her grief, or had it become something deeper and more complicated? Jessica, Mike said quietly as they pulled into their driveway. I need to tell you something. Her stomach clenched. Okay. When I saw Emma's empty bed tonight, when I thought she might be gone, he turned to face her, his eyes intense in the dim light from the street lamp. My first thought wasn't just about losing her. It was about losing both of you. This life we've built together. Jessica's breath caught. Mike, I know this isn't what we planned. I know you signed up to help Emma, not to become part of some complicated family situation with a single dad who's falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between them like a dare. Who says I didn't sign up for that? Jessica whispered. Mike stared at her. Are you saying? I'm saying that when you called tonight, when I thought something might have happened to Emma, I realized that this isn't just a job anymore. She's not just my client. You're not just her father. Jessica's voice was shaky but determined. You're my family, both of you, and I'm terrified of losing that. Emma stirred in the back seat, mumbling something about butterfly clouds, and they both turned to look at her sleeping face, so peaceful now, trusting that the adults would figure everything out. The custody hearing is in 5 days, Mike said. I know. If we lose, we won't, Jessica said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. We can't. Emma belongs with us. As they carried the sleeping little girl into the house and tucked her back into bed, Jessica realized that somewhere in the past month, she'd stopped being Jessica Davis, the flight attendant who helped people temporarily, and then moved on. She'd become Jessica Davis, the woman who would fight heaven and earth to keep this little girl safe and this family intact. But the real question was, would love be enough to convince a judge that an unconventional family could be just as strong as a traditional one? What a cure. Love doesn't ask for permission to rearrange your entire life. It just shows up at 3 a.m. in an airport terminal, and dares you to choose courage over comfort. The Denver family court was nothing like the sterile conference rooms where Jessica had endured her deposition. It felt more like a stage where real lives were decided by strangers in black robes. Judge Margaret Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind but sharp eyes, presided over the hearing that would determine Emma's future. Jessica sat in the gallery behind Mike and Patricia, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Emma was in school, spared from witnessing the adults fight over her fate, though Jessica knew the little girl was drawing anxious butterflies in her notebook instead of paying attention to math lessons. "Your Honor," Harrison Caldwell began, his voice commanding the courtroom's attention. "We're here today because Mr. Williams has made a series of impulsive decisions that prioritize his emotional needs over his daughter's stability. Rather than seeking professional grief counseling for Emma, he hired an unlicensed caregiver with a documented history of instability and abandonment issues." Jessica felt each word like a physical blow, but she kept her expression neutral, as Patricia had coached her. Caldwell continued his opening statement with surgical precision, painting Mike as a struggling single father who couldn't accept help from Emma's grandparents, people who could provide stability, structure, and the resources necessary for proper child development. "Furthermore," Caldwell said, turning slightly toward Jessica, "Mr. Williams has introduced a romantic element into what should have been a purely professional caregiving arrangement, creating confusion and potential trauma for a child who has already lost one mother figure." Patricia stood for the defense. "Your Honor, what my client has created isn't confusion, it's healing. Emma Williams has made more progress in the past month than in the 8 months since her mother's death. She's speaking more, sleeping better, and for the first time since her loss, she's planning for the future instead of living in the past." The next 3 hours were a careful ballet of testimony and evidence. Mike took the stand first, his honey brown eyes never leaving the judge as he described Emma's transformation since Jessica's arrival. "She laughs now, Your Honor, real laughter, not the polite sound she was making to try to make me feel better. She asks questions about her mother without immediately crying. She talks about tomorrow, next week, even next Christmas." Mike's voice grew thick with emotion. "She's becoming herself again." Under cross-examination, Caldwell attacked Mike's financial stability, his work schedule, his ability to provide educational opportunities that the Hendersons could offer. "Mr. Williams, isn't it true that you've had to sell your wife's jewelry to pay legal fees?" "Yes." "And that your business income has dropped by 40% since your wife's death?" "Yes." "But, and that you're currently living in a rental property rather than the home you owned with your wife?" Patricia objected, but the damage was clear. Mike looked exactly like what Caldwell wanted him to appear, a man struggling to stay afloat. Then it was Jessica's turn. She walked to the witness stand feeling like she was stepping onto a tightrope stretched over an abyss. Every eye in the courtroom was on her as she swore to tell the truth. Patricia led her through her qualifications, her progress in child psychology studies, URI, her employment history with the airline. But when Caldwell stood for cross-examination, Jessica knew the real battle was about to begin. "Hey, Miss Davis, you testified that you formed a deep emotional bond with Emma Williams. Would you describe yourself as someone who falls in love easily?" "Objection," Patricia called. "I'll rephrase. Miss Davis, in your adult life, how many times have you told someone you loved them?" Jessica's heart pounded. That's not relevant to my ability to care for Emma." "Answer the question, please." "Twice." "And how long did those relationships last?" "Neither lasted more than 8 months. So you have a pattern of intense emotional connections that burn out quickly. Why should we believe your connection to Emma will be any different?" Jessica looked out at the gallery and saw Mike's face, tight with worry. She thought about Emma, probably sitting in her second-grade classroom right now, trusting that the adults would make the right decision. "Because," Jessica said quietly, "I've never been someone's lifeline before. I've never been the person a child runs to when she has nightmares, or the person whose approval matters more than anything else in the world. And I've never loved someone so much that the thought of losing them makes me physically sick. But you've felt intense emotions before that faded. What makes this different?" Jessica took a deep breath, knowing this moment would determine everything. "When I was 7 and my mother died, I needed someone to understand that my grief wasn't something to be fixed or managed. It was something to be honored. I needed someone to sit with me in the sadness and show me that it was okay to feel everything, even when it hurt." She looked directly at Judge Chen. "Emma doesn't need me to replace her mother. She needs me to help her carry her mother's love forward. And I don't think that's the kind of job you leave when it gets hard. I think it's the kind of job that teaches you what forever actually means. The courtroom was silent for a long moment. Your Honor, came a small voice from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, still wearing her school backpack, her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, behind her, looking apologetic and worried. I'm sorry, Miss Rodriguez said, but she insisted on coming. She said it was an emergency. Judge Chen looked at the little girl with curiosity rather than annoyance. Call Emma, sweetheart. What's the emergency? Emma walked down the aisle with the confidence of someone who had something important to say. Your Honor, I heard the grown-ups talking about what's best for me, but nobody asked me what I think. And what do you think? I think families aren't just about having lots of money or big houses or the same last name. Emma's voice was clear and strong, carrying the wisdom of a child who had learned hard lessons early. I think families are about who knows that you need butterfly pancakes when you're sad, and who teaches you that it's okay to miss your mom and love your new mom at the same time. Jessica felt tears stream down her face as Emma continued. Miss Jessica didn't try to make me stop missing Mommy. She helped me understand that missing someone means you love them so much that the love doesn't have anywhere else to go. And she taught me that I can give some of that love to new people without taking it away from Mommy. Judge Chen leaned forward. Emma, do you understand what this hearing is about? Yes, ma'am. You're deciding if I get to stay with Daddy and Miss Jessica, or if I have to go live with Grandma and Grandpa Henderson. Emma's voice wavered slightly. And I love my grandparents, but they still cry every time they look at me because I remind them of Mommy. With Daddy and Miss Jessica, I get to be happy about Mommy memories instead of sad about them. The judge was quiet for a long moment, studying the little girl who had just articulated what all the adult testimony had been trying to prove. Emma, one more question. If you could have anything in the world right now, what would it be? Emma thought for a moment, then smiled. I would want Mommy to meet Miss Jessica, because I think they would be best friends. And I would want our family to be forever, even when things get hard. As Emma was gently escorted back to Ms. Rodriguez, Judge Chen called for a brief recess. Jessica sat in the hallway, emotionally drained, while Mike paced and Patricia made hushed phone calls. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Chen's expression was unreadable. This case has been challenging because it forces us to examine what constitutes a child's best interest when there are no clear villains, only people who love a little girl very much. She looked at each party in turn. The Hendersons offer financial security and traditional stability. Mr. Williams offers continuity with Emma's established life and routines. Miss Davis offers emotional understanding born from shared experience. Jessica held her breath. But Emma herself has made it clear that she doesn't need us to choose between these things. She needs all of them. Judge Chen's voice grew firm. I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Williams, with Miss Davis approved as Emma's primary caregiver and educational support person. The Hendersons will have scheduled visitation rights and will continue to be important figures in Emma's life. Jessica felt the world tilt sideways with relief, but Judge Chen wasn't finished. Done. However, I want to be very clear about something. Miss Davis, you are taking on a legal and moral responsibility that will be scrutinized. If there are any changes in your living situation, employment status, or relationship with Mr. Williams that could negatively impact Emma's stability, this case will be reopened immediately. As they left the courthouse, Emma running ahead to feed pigeons on the steps, Mike caught Jessica's hand. Hey, we did it, he said, his voice filled with wonder. No, Jessica corrected, watching Emma laugh as birds fluttered around her feet. We just got permission to do it. The real work starts now. But for the first time in her life, Jessica wasn't afraid of the hard work ahead. Sometimes winning isn't about proving you're perfect. It's about proving you're willing to grow into the person someone needs you to be. 3 months after the custody hearing, Jessica woke up on a Saturday morning to the sound of Emma giggling in the kitchen and the smell of bacon burning on the stove. She padded downstairs in her pajamas to find Mike standing at the stovetop, his hair mussed from sleep, trying to flip pancakes while Emma helped by adding rainbow sprinkles to the batter. The kitchen was a disaster zone of flour handprints and syrup puddles, but the scene was so perfectly, chaotically domestic that Jessica felt her heart swell with contentment. Good morning, beautiful ladies, Mike said, leaning over to kiss Jessica's forehead as naturally as if they'd been doing this dance for years instead of months. We're making celebration breakfast. What are we celebrating? Jessica asked, accepting the coffee mug Emma proudly handed her. Tell her, Daddy, Emma bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Mike set down the spatula and turned to face Jessica fully, his honey brown eyes sparkling with an emotion she'd learned to recognize as pure joy. "I got the call yesterday. The solar energy contract with the state of Colorado came through. It's enough to stabilize the business, buy back our house, and—" He paused, suddenly looking nervous, "and maybe start planning for some other big changes." Jessica felt her breath catch. Over the past months, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm of family life, but they'd been careful not to define exactly what they were to each other. She was legally Emma's caregiver, practically Mike's partner in every way that mattered, but they'd never discussed the future beyond the immediate need to keep Emma safe and happy. "What kind of changes?" Jessica asked, though her racing heart suggested she already knew. Emma couldn't contain herself any longer. "Daddy wants to ask you to marry us. I mean, marry him, but really marry both of us because we're a package deal, right, Daddy?" Mike laughed, running a hand through his hair in the gesture Jessica had come to love. Emma rose. "You were supposed to let me do the asking, but you were taking forever, and Miss Jessica's coffee is getting cold, and the pancakes are getting burny," Emma protested. Jessica looked between them. This man who had taught her what it meant to be part of something bigger than herself, and this little girl who had shown her that love wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up even when you were scared. "For the record," Jessica said softly, "the answer would be yes." Mike's face transformed with relief and wonder. "Really? Even though I'm a single dad with a complicated custody situation and a 7-year-old who will definitely want to plan the whole wedding?" "Especially because of that," Jessica said, gathering both of them into her arms. Emma wiggled free and ran to the refrigerator, returning with a drawing she'd apparently been working on in secret. It showed 3 stick figures standing under a rainbow, all holding hands. At the top, in Emma's careful printing, it read, "The Davis-Williams family. Official. I've been practicing writing my new name," Emma announced proudly. "Emma Rose Davis-Williams. It's very long, but I like how it sounds like music." That afternoon, they drove to Denver's Botanic Gardens, where Mike had planned a proper proposal despite Emma's kitchen revelation. As they walked through the Butterfly Conservatory, Emma's favorite spot, Jessica marveled at how much their lives had changed since that turbulent flight from Denver to Seattle. "You know," Mike said as they watched Emma chase butterflies through the tropical garden, "when Sarah was dying, she made me promise something." Jessica's chest tightened. They'd learned to talk about Sarah openly, but mentions of her final days were still tender territory. "She made me promise that if I ever fell in love again, I wouldn't feel guilty about it. She said Emma deserved to grow up seeing what healthy love looked like, even if it meant she had 2 mothers instead of 1. And how do you feel about that now?" Jessica asked quietly. Mike turned to face her, his expression serious. "I feel like Sarah somehow knew that Emma would need exactly the kind of love you could give her. And I feel like maybe—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe some people are meant to love the same little girl from different places, one from heaven, one from right here on earth." Emma ran up to them, breathless and glowing, a blue butterfly having landed on her outstretched finger. "Look, it chose me." "That means good luck, right, Miss Jessica?" "The best kind of luck," Jessica agreed, thinking about all the moments of chance that had led them here. The turbulent flight, the empty seat beside Mike and Emma, the decision to stay in Seattle instead of flying home to her old life. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep between them during movie night, Jessica and Mike sat on the back porch under the stars. The summer air was warm and sweet with the scent of the neighbor's jasmine, and Jessica felt a peace she'd never known existed. "Are you scared?" Mike asked, his fingers intertwined with hers. "Terrified," Jessica admitted. "I still don't know how to be someone people can count on forever. I still wake up sometimes and think about how easy it would be to just disappear if things got too complicated. But then I think about Emma's butterfly drawings on the refrigerator, and your terrible singing in the shower, and the way you both look at me like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Jessica smiled in the darkness, "and I realize that forever isn't some impossible mountain to climb. It's just choosing to stay tomorrow, and then the day after that, and then the day after that." Mike lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "For what it's worth, I think you've been choosing to stay every day since that first flight. You just didn't realize it yet." Through the window, they could see Emma sleeping peacefully on the couch, her butterfly stuffed animal clutched against her chest. Her sketchbook opened beside her to a new drawing. This one showed an airplane flying through clouds shaped like hearts, with the words, "Family Vacation to see Grandma and Grandpa Henderson," written at the bottom in purple crayon. "She's planning our life," Mike observed with amusement. "She's been planning our life since the moment she met me," Jessica corrected. "We just finally caught up to her vision." As they carried Emma upstairs to her own bed, tucking her in with whispered goodnights and gentle kisses, Jessica realized that she'd found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Not just love, not just family, but home, the kind that lived in moments rather than places, in promises rather than possessions. Standing in the doorway of Emma's room, watching the little girl sleep surrounded by butterfly decorations and drawings, Jessica touched the silver butterfly necklace at her throat, her mother's final gift that had somehow led her to this moment. "This life, this love, thank you," she whispered to the darkness, speaking to her mother, to Sarah, to whatever force in the universe had orchestrated this beautiful collision of three broken hearts learning to beat as one. Mike's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her close as they stood vigil over their sleeping daughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: wedding planning with a 7-year-old consultant, navigating the complexities of blended family dynamics, continuing the patient work of healing from old wounds while building something entirely new. But tonight, Jessica Davis was exactly where she belonged. Home in the love of a man who saw her scars as evidence of her strength, and a little girl who had taught her that the most beautiful butterflies emerged from the most challenging transformations. Outside their window, an airplane's lights blinked across the star-filled sky, carrying other travelers toward their own unexpected destinations. And Jessica smiled, knowing that sometimes the most important journeys began with turbulence and ended with the gentle landing of a heart finally coming home. Love doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be present, to choose courage over comfort, and to believe that some storms are worth weathering together. 2 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the newly opened Sarah's Wings Child Therapy Center, casting rainbow patterns across the walls where hundreds of butterfly drawings created by young clients formed a living gallery of hope and healing. Jessica Davis Williams stood in her office doorway, watching 9-year-old Emma lead a group of children in what she called butterfly meditation, a breathing exercise Emma had invented to help other kids manage their big feelings. The little girl who had once been too afraid to speak to strangers now glowed with confidence as she guided her new friends through techniques for finding calm in the storm. "In through your nose like you're smelling flowers," Emma instructed a shy 6-year-old named Marcus, whose father had died in a car accident 3 months earlier. "Out through your mouth like you're blowing birthday candles. And remember, it's okay if you feel sad while you're breathing. Sad feelings need air too." The wisdom in those words, spoken so matter-of-factly by a child who had learned to transform her own pain into purpose, never failed to amaze Jessica. Emma had become the center's unofficial peer counselor, helping newly bereaved children understand that grief wasn't something to be cured, but something to be carried with grace. "Knock, knock," Mike's voice came from behind her, and Jessica turned to find her husband of 8 months holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing his weekend uniform of jeans and a Colorado Rockies t-shirt. His solar energy business had not only recovered but was now thriving, providing sustainable power solutions across 3 states. More importantly, he'd learned to balance work with family time, understanding that success meant being present for the moments that mattered. "How's our little therapist doing?" he asked, settling beside Jessica to watch Emma work with the children. "She's incredible," Jessica said softly. "Yesterday, she convinced a 10-year-old who hadn't spoken since his mother's funeral to tell her about his favorite memory. She has this gift for making kids feel safe enough to be vulnerable." Through the large windows, they could see the center's playground where other children were engaged in various activities, some drawing at outdoor easels, others tending to the butterfly garden that had become the center's signature feature. The facility served 30 families now, offering grief counseling, trauma therapy, and support groups for children who had lost parents. "Mrs. Davis Williams?" A small voice interrupted their observation, and they turned to see Marcus tugging on Jessica's sweater. "Emma says you're the lady who teaches kids that their mommies and daddies in heaven can still see them. Is that really true?" Jessica knelt to Marcus's eye level, her heart aching for this little boy who was walking the same difficult path she and Emma had traveled. "What do you think, Marcus?" I think maybe my daddy can see me when I'm being brave," Like when I helped my little sister stop crying last night, or when I ate all my vegetables even though they were yucky. I think you're absolutely right, Jessica said gently. And I think your daddy is very proud of the brave, kind boy you're becoming. Marcus nodded solemnly, then brightened. Emma's teaching us how to make paper airplanes that can fly messages to heaven. Want to help? As Marcus ran back to rejoin the group, Mike slipped his arm around Jessica's waist. You know what I love most about watching you work? What? You never try to take their pain away. You just teach them how to carry it differently. Jessica leaned into his warmth, thinking about how much their lives had changed since that turbulent flight 2 years ago. The scared, guarded flight attendant, who had been afraid of emotional attachments, had evolved into a licensed child therapist who specialized in helping families navigate loss and rebuild connections. Dr. Patricia called this morning, Mike said. The Hendersons want to bring Emma to visit Sarah's grave next weekend. They're finally ready to let Emma talk about her mom without falling apart themselves. Jessica smiled. Emma's relationship with her maternal grandparents had healed slowly but surely over the past 2 years. They'd learned to see their granddaughter's happiness as a tribute to Sarah's memory, rather than a betrayal of it. And Emma had learned that loving new people didn't diminish her love for those who were gone. And there's something else, Mike continued, his voice taking on that nervous quality Jessica had learned to recognize when he was planning surprises. I got a call from Denver Children's Hospital. They want to partner with the center to create a pediatric grief support program. It would mean expanding, hiring more staff, maybe even opening satellite locations. Jessica's breath caught. When they'd opened Sarah's Wings 18 months ago, it had been a small dream, a way to help a few families while honoring the memory of the woman who had loved Emma first. Now it was growing into something that could touch hundreds of lives. That's incredible, Mike. But it would also mean long hours, more responsibility, probably some travel for training and conferences, he finished. I know it would be a big change for us, for Emma. Through the window, they watched Emma demonstrate proper paper airplane folding technique to a group of fascinated children, her dark hair catching the sunlight, her laugh floating across the playground like music. What does Emma think? Jessica asked. She said, and I quote, if Mommy Sarah could help one little girl by sending Miss Jessica to us, imagine how many kids we could help if we made the center bigger. Mike chuckled. She's already planning the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Apparently, it involves butterfly releases and cupcakes shaped like airplanes. Jessica felt tears blur her vision as she watched the children play. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude for this life she'd stumbled into by accident and chosen to embrace with intention. You know what's funny? She said to Mike. 2 years ago, I thought commitment meant staying in one place with one job doing the same thing forever. Now I realize commitment is about growing together, taking risks together, building something bigger than what any of us could create alone. So is that a yes to the expansion? Before Jessica could answer, Emma came bounding over, her cheeks flushed from running and her arms full of freshly folded paper airplanes. Mom, Dad, she called out, still getting used to the new family titles that had become official after Mike and Jessica's adoption paperwork was finalized. Look what we made. Each airplane has a message for someone in heaven. Marcus wrote one to his daddy, and Sophia wrote one to her big brother, and I wrote one to Mommy Sarah telling her about the new kids who need help. Emma held up her airplane, which was decorated with tiny drawn butterflies and careful lettering. Want to help us launch them? Jessica looked at Mike, then at Emma, then at the group of children waiting expectantly on the playground. These kids who had learned that loss didn't have to mean the end of love, that families could be created in all kinds of ways, that healing was possible even when hearts felt permanently broken. I can't think of anything I'd rather do, Jessica said. As they walked outside together, Jessica felt a familiar flutter of nerves, not about the decision to expand the center, but about the beautiful uncertainty of a future built on love rather than fear. She touched the butterfly necklace at her throat, thinking about her mother, about Sarah, about all the women who had loved these children from both heaven and earth. The afternoon breeze picked up just as the children released their paper airplanes, sending dozens of white wings soaring against the blue Colorado sky. Emma stood between Mike and Jessica, her small hands clasped in theirs, her face turned upward with absolute faith that their messages would reach their intended recipients. Do you think they'll really fly all the way to heaven? Asked Marcus, shading his eyes to watch his airplane catch an updraft. I think, Emma said with the wisdom of someone who had learned to trust in invisible connections. They'll fly exactly where they're supposed to go, just like we did. As Jessica watched the paper airplanes dance on the wind, she realized that Emma was right. Some journeys couldn't be planned or controlled. They could only be trusted. 3 broken hearts had collided in midair during turbulence, and somehow, instead of crashing, they had learned to soar. Standing there in the sunlight with her husband and daughter, surrounded by children who were learning that love was stronger than loss, Jessica Davis Williams finally understood what her mother had been trying to tell her with that butterfly necklace all those years ago. Sometimes you had to trust the wind to carry you home, and sometimes home turned out to be a place you never knew you were searching for, with people you never expected to love, doing work that transformed your deepest wounds into your greatest gifts. The paper airplanes grew smaller and smaller against the endless blue sky until they disappeared entirely, carrying their precious cargo of hope and memory and unbreakable love to destinations beyond sight but never beyond reach. Zurki, the most beautiful endings are really just the beginning of everything you never dared to dream was possible. Final reflection. In a world that often feels turbulent and uncertain, what dreams are you brave enough to release into the wind? What paper airplane messages would you send to the universe about the love you're ready to give and receive? Remember, your story matters. Your healing journey inspires others. And sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple act of courage, like choosing to stay when everything in you wants to run. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.